I will get started then. Let me know when you're able to see the presentation, and I
We
will.
can see it.
Yep, I
Okay,
can see your
I can
screen.
see it.
excellent. This is a picture of me, a slightly older picture without a beard, but you can see the actual rendition of me in the Brady Bunch box. But my job is I'm the vice president of product practices and delivery. So I look after the engineering practice, the product management practice, and the product design practices. So kind of looking after and supporting all the consultants that are doing the work at the company, and then looking at how do we improve delivery. So like how do we put things together for our clients, and how do we engage with our clients based on their needs. And that kind of all falls in my domain. And I've been doing that for about 1.5 years here, and loving it every day. It's super challenging, and I like being part of a growing company. And I'll tell you a little bit about Integral here on the next slide. So Integral's twice as old as my tenure here. So we're started in 2017. There's 33 of us. I think that's actually, by the 12th, it'll be 34 of us, I think. So we're slowly growing. We started off with a focus on mobility. We're open to other projects, not just mobility projects, but our specialty, our wheelhouse is really like working on software product in the mobility space. And a lot of our clients kind of represent that. You can see below. We have enterprise clients from like Ford and Bosch, like our big anchor clients. And then we've worked with startups and continue to work with startups. It's super important to the culture and the purpose of the company. So we design an in-vehicle system for main mobility, and we continue to do work on the autonomic teams. And autonomic is a startup based out of Palo Alto, California that does connected vehicle data services. They rationalize vehicle data so that people can build apps from it, which is pretty cool. They have an office in Detroit, and we support them, and we're super proud of our clients. We think they're some of the best clients, and we work super hard to get and keep our clients, and we have great relationships with them, and that's actually one of the best parts about my job. So you are here for a context sharing and iterative problem solving. So in this talk, I am going to tell you why I'm doing it, so why it matters, what I'm hoping you'll take away from it. I'll tell you a little bit about how teams work at Integral. So it's not totally unique to Integral. A lot of companies that do software and manage delivery teams work the same way we work. I'm going to talk, it's important that I talk about how we do that. And then I'm going to talk about the benefits of problem solving as a team. So iterative problem solving matters, context sharing matters, and problem solving matter. And they're kind of woven together, and you'll sort of see that through the course of the presentation. But really the benefit of like looking at a problem together as a group of people and pulling it apart and thinking out loud together is super important to learning how fast we learn in each of our practices, and also like how well the team works, like ultimately like the productivity and efficacy of the team. And there's data that supports this. I'm totally fascinated by this. I'm going to share a little bit of that with you today and kind of give you the overview of like these kind of two areas or two domains that contribute to how you can kind of do this on your projects. And hopefully I'll introduce some tools to you that allow you to do that. So why I'm giving this talk, I'm kind of flipping the order a little bit. So I know that we socialized context sharing and iterative problem solving. I'm just flipping it a little bit just so it feels like it's in sequence and you kind of know what to expect. But I'm going to give you some problem solving strategies that you can implement as a team. And the good news is that they're super easy to try out, which is even better for me. That's like even more exciting to share. Some parts of it might feel remedial, and then other parts are going to feel like you know, high concept or high sophistication. And that's okay. That's just what I enjoyed about putting this presentation together was the high concept and remedial part of it. I like thinking about things I think I already know and challenging my assumptions around those things. So why I think this topic matters, why context sharing and problem solving matter, is I think it's just ultimately it's a good goal for a team to be accountable for its work. Like, and I think context sharing is a way for parts of the team to share what they know and what they're learning with other parts of the team, so that everybody can kind of bring their I call it net positives. So like I'm passionate about teams, you know, having these net positives, having like delivering on more than the sum of the parts of the team. So like we can achieve so much more as a team than we can as individuals. I think this is a totally fascinating like concept or phenomena. And I think these kind of two elements really demonstrate that. And that's why they're worth trying. And so I kind of hope that people try them. Like I hope that the both of you maybe Lindsay too, gets to try doing this with someone else. The reason why I'm actually giving this talk is I was working with we found it kind of an interesting way to work with my own boss. So I report to the CEO of the company, and we are very different in terms of personality and interpersonal styles and so forth. And so like we found a way to work together that was really about deconstructing problems together. And like when we both really love whiteboarding, it's sort of like what we really like about doing this kind of work is like thinking on a board and sharing with other people and letting people challenge and pick apart our assumptions. And this is sort of an extension of that, like that idea that was sparked in that interaction. And I've been doing this for a while, so having this happen late in my career definitely feels remedial. Like I said, I think it's important to kind of do this every once in a while as challenge your kind of underlying assumptions around your work. So it's also important to describe how we work at Integral. And so I'm going to go into that a little bit. And this is kind of what things look like in the lower photos before the COVID and work from home kind of policy. And maybe what we're doing now looks more like the upper left corner of this image, but all the teams at Integral work in what are called balanced teams. And even more specifically, engineers on the team, they do pair programming. So like the two gentlemen in the lower left corner, they're working on the same code base. Their screens show the same thing, and their job is to sort of like navigate and construct and design a software solution, or their approach to coding and implementing a solution based on their kind of collective knowledge together. And they're sort of doing this all the time. And actually one of the things that we're going to talk about today is sort of like how to do this with the broader team, with the bigger part of the team. And so this concept I mentioned wasn't really unique to Integral, but it's this idea of what's called a balanced team. And so a balanced team typically is comprised of product managers, product designers, and product engineers, all working in a team that's kind of located close together. And the idea is that these three disciplines overlap in a way that's sort of beneficial or has that sort of net positive effect, which is that you have product engineers that are kind of like guarding the architecture and making sure that the scale of the application matches what it needs to do, kind of managing the needs from a technical perspective. The product managers are kind of managing the needs of the product and the team from the business perspective, like what's good business? Do we have enough people to match the needs of delivering this and the way that it needs to be delivered? And then the product designers, they're helping us envision how the product is going to be desirable to customers, to people who are going to use this product. So they can look far ahead, they can look in the near term, and they kind of bring that user-centered perspective and accountability to the team. And that's sort of how we look at these three disciplines interacting. Like I said, it was not necessarily useful or unique to, it's definitely useful to Integral. It's not unique to Integral, that way of working, but a way to look at this is like maybe how the Stanford D School looks at it, which is like, you kind of look at that model in reverse is sort of like, hey, the team is all these different disciplines coming together. The team's shared superpower is sort of like where they overlap, where these disciplines kind of hold each other accountable and represent those viewpoints of feasibility and desirability and sort of good business. And then the product itself is a result of the confluence of those skills or those perspectives that are driven together to make a solution. And then ultimately, that's what the product strategy is. It's like whatever the value is wrapped up in all that, like all the things that those people do on that team and how they steer that product towards the market. That's really what the underlying value is. It's the sum of that work and those insights and the tenacity of that team. And so it's a fascinating idea. Like I said, lots of companies do this. This is a completely borrowed sort of concept, but it's a really powerful one. And I would wager that once you kind of work in a team format like this is probably the only way you want to work, and in software delivery and software product development ever. I don't know anyone who's really like taken a step backwards in this process. So. And I'm happy to kind of pause and ask questions about this concept because I know it's kind of a rich concept, but you're welcome to ask me questions as we go too. I kind of like an open format. So, and if there aren't any questions, I will keep going. Cool. So lots of things in our teams that we do are really based on context sharing and making the teams, making it part of the DNA of the team. So we have like ceremonies, a lot of agile teams have. inceptions, iteration planning meetings, user story review, estimation, and prioritization. So we kind of do these things collectively as a team to sort of kind of up our IQ around the problem we're solving, the way we're solving it, and what we're doing to try to solve the problem. And then we also rely on like one-on-one feedback sessions or plus deltas. And so the standard for this is really comes from the engineering side of the house, come from the top sort of circle in that Venn diagram, which is that engineers on our teams are committed to sort of giving each other feedback about how they can be better pairs, how they can write better code together, and even how they can work better interpersonally every day. And there are engineers who are really dogmatic about this. They do it all the time. They're really committed to that feedback and improving. And they do it in a way where they sort of are safe to do it, and they value each other's opinions, and they also look forward to pairing and working with other people as a result of it. They get kind of good at this. They build the skill up to do that. And so I mentioned pair programming. We kind of encourage other practices to pair as well. There are times where we want product managers to pair. Sometimes they pair with designers. Sometimes designers pair with designers. And the same idea happens there. As practitioners, those two practitioners can come together and they can give each other feedback and improve the way they're doing their work. And then retrospective. So collectively as a whole team, the team looks back at its performance, everything from like its interpersonal dynamics to the way its productivity to its general morale. And it looks at those problems, identifies like problems or issues that it wants to solve, or good things that that are happening that it wants to improve on and do more of. They do that every week on most of our teams. I think all of our teams are on 1 week iterations, and they kind of are committed to looking at improvements or continuous improvement that way. And so one kind of the genesis for this conversation is like, well, what things like could make this better? Like these 6 bullets are like really good things to happen on teams and really good ways to like improve as practitioners. But what are the things that might make it better? And I'm starting to believe that like parts of our practices kind of fall short in some ways. And so I was looking really critically at what they were. And it seemed to me that like complex problems require more knowledge and focus to help solve. And so if everyone's sort of focused on being busy being engineers, PMs, and designers, and doing all the good work that's involved in doing those roles, that we kind of de-emphasize a little bit some roles for efficiency's sake. We all want to get work done. We all want to like ship that prototype or push that code to production, or all the things that we do as individual practitioners. And this tends to force silos or make people kind of experts on certain things. And they're the only people that hold context on a number of decisions that were made. And so some of the tools that I'm introduced to you are really about like introducing a way to share that decision making and to share that the deconstruction of those problems, to do them collectively, and also just to share them back as sort of a record or a log or as a tool so that other people can ask questions about the work, gain context quickly if they're new to the team, or challenge assumptions or ask questions about decisions that were made so that we can improve the software and improve our system. So it's a form of accountability that I find fascinating. And I think there's a ton of other benefits. And so I'm going to kind of list those out. I borrow these pretty liberally from an author from Entrepreneur Magazine. And this is, all this data is based on a Stanford study about team dynamics. So they looked at what they call like high performing teams versus individual contributors. And these 7 sort of principles of high performing teams have these 7 benefits. And so the 7 benefits I'm going to talk about is like the idea of reducing communicative overhead. And so even though we have really lean, agile practices, solving problems together, coming together as a team to solve a problem has a bunch of benefits that are really around like reducing the amount of communication we have to do. And the tools for context sharing do the same thing. So one of the things that we do is that we're actually doing these things together, so we don't have to repeat ourselves. We don't have to have a bunch of one-on-one conversations. We can hear people's questions. And as a result, we get to kind of work together. And that performing the work together, being productive together, really has that effect, which is like this double duty idea of like slicing the work down to make it smaller. And also like you get a sense that we are thinking more laterally because we have more minds in the room or in the Miro board or wherever we're doing the work. And then we own the outcomes together. So if we share the goals or the outcomes that we're driving towards and why we're making the software the way we are, we don't if we do this more often and we collaborate and problem solve more often together, we don't have to do that. We don't have to like remind each other. We're all kind of living the problem together, and we're all pulling the problem apart. And so the way that context sharing best happens is sort of as artifacts. And this goes again a little bit against the Agile manifesto. We're not choosing documentation over work functional software, but we know that there's complexity in some of the work that we do, and there's an appropriate artifact or a way of sharing that information. That could just be like having a predictable folder structure for someone to navigate the artifacts of the team or the work of the team. Even better yet are things like collaboration boards that show like the history or decision making of the team. We'll kind of go into those a little bit later in the presentation. Even a spreadsheet that shares context. Something that people own together and is the output of their collaboration or problem solving together goes a lot further than asking people to have one-on-one conversations as they pick up a user story, for example. And then we can show that we value our team's viewpoints. So like the dynamics of having a high-performing team is really like us kind of growing as contributors as well. So like being able to practice our active listening skills, so like learning to understand where someone's coming from or understanding their experiences, the things they're suggesting or trying to contribute, super valuable. This is one of the best ways to get to know people and what they care about and where they're pushing an idea or where they're thinking in new terms. We can help each other do that. And we also get to learn about each other. So you spend a lot of time at work, you spend a lot of time with your coworkers, and a really valuable thing to do is to kind of know where people are coming from, and people are kind of at their best sometimes through the work that they do. They care about it in a unique way, and it's something we kind of share, we have in common, and that allows us to kind of value each other basically. And then sharpening our critical reasoning skills, because often we don't have hours and hours and hours to do problem solving together or share context together in a work week. We time box our work, and time boxing forces us to kind of to get really good at short circuiting conversations that aren't productive, or steering us back to our goals, or challenging our own assumptions within a suggestion or a kind of a solutioning sort of conversation. And so doing this together and then understanding other people's thought processes make us kind of better contributors and collaborators. And then decomposing problems together. So saving individual energy. It sounds like a really huggy, touchy-feely kind of thing, but doing things that you haven't done before is incredibly emotionally draining for people on a team. And some people kind of react differently to oh, we're gonna decompose a problem. That means we're gonna think about all the different permutations about why this problem exists, or the symptoms of this problem, or all the things that come out of these sessions. And you can sort of make it safe for people to do that. You can make it one, lower energy for yourself and less emotional energy. And at the same time, you can encourage somebody to kind of step in and do something outside their comfort zone by kind of pulling a problem apart and taking an area of comfort or expertise and using that to kind of build their ability to become better collaborators. And that's incredibly powerful thing to do. And then thinking laterally. So a lot of times, confirmation bias or some cognitive biases kind of come into our thinking, and we think I'm just going to draw a straight line between these two dots. And you don't have to do that. When you think in a group, it might feel slower at first, but what you're kind of doing is you're really incrementally building up some of that context as a team. And that's really what you want to do to kind of get that, kind of achieve those net positives of working together. Building off each other's ideas, this idea of yes and is a really good exercise. You may not end up with the most perfect solution or the best deconstruction of a problem, but the team is going to feel more, and they're going to feel like they're in a better position to solve the problem, and they're also going to feel a higher level of ownership of the problem, and that's great for morale. It's also sort of egalitarian in a way, which is you're just letting the ideas win. You're just sort of letting the team will sort of speak up and support the ideas that will work, and most of the tools that I'll introduce kind of allow that to happen really, really in a nice way. This kind of requires vulnerability by the people on the team to do this. You can't be leveraging all of your experience and your gut intuitions into the team. You really have to listen to each other and in a sense build off of each other, and that's sort of the trick. And so for more experienced or seasoned people working with people with maybe less experience, that have more wide open ideas about the problem they're solving. This is why there's a net positive or value between those two perspectives and all the gradations of experience in between. And then you're also reinforcing the psychological safety of the team. And I kind of mentioned this in a few different places, but a team that can kind of do this and keep the conversation open and sort of respect each other's ideas and look to extend their ideas, you're going to make all those people are going to be better off and do that with other people. And that this maturity or psychological safety of the team will go up quite a bit. And you might find that that is really beneficial as well. Sharing encouragement and support. So not everybody is great at collaborating, and some people even have, struggle to become good at just pairing with one other person, like we were showing earlier. And so doing this collectively kind of demystifies the process. It's sort of like, yeah, anybody can get together and pull and problem solve together. In fact, the simplest version or model for problem solving is just 3 molecules or 3 circles in a diagram that anyone could plot out or model with each other. And it's sort of one of the things that's so, like I was mentioning before, like so seductive and so useful about this approach is that it's just a simple way to work with another person. And so by demystifying those tools, the next time that person goes and works with someone else, you kind of added to their playbook, or you've added to their quiver of tools, and you enhance their career and their work in some way. And that those are really good, unapologetically good goals to be working with other people and achieving. And then fostering peer-to-peer development and growth. So you know people better, you kind of know where they're coming from, you identify places where they need growth or support, you can even offer even better feedback or even mentoring or suggest mentoring or whatever, or for yourself, you can just ask for it. All that stuff tends to come out through problem solving together and having a kind of a team problem solving session. And then ultimately there's a little bit more team cohesion achieved because the team is developing a common language for solving problems together, and those meetings and that investment starts to pay off. That kind of peer-to-peer development tends to benefit the team's collaboration because they've kind of accrued that knowledge together collectively, and they've earned that perspective or point of view together as a team as opposed to individuals with forceful ideas. And then the last one is really my favorite one. It's about people smarts. And so like the more we do this and the more patience we extend to each other, the more we're open to learning from different people, the better off we are. And the kind of, I think ultimately the better we kind of pay attention and use empathy tools and empathy thinking as our first approach to solving a problem, which is like, so why should we do that for ourselves and our own team? Like we use empathy tools for understanding users and the people we're making software for. We should probably do the same thing for the people we work for and the people we work with. It also makes conflict resolution much easier. It's like you're kind of slicing down all those like possible places of tension between individuals because like you're sharing a common goal and you're having ownership of the common goal. And so those flare-ups or those, which are just natural, normal things that people do, they're just smaller and more contained, and not can't avoid them, but I think this is like a better way to approach them. So here's the kind of fear equals consumption proposition, which is like so what's the cost of not doing problem solving as a team? You often get knowledge silos, which can feel good to some people because they're sort of heroes on the project because they know a lot. But the negatives are that the team isn't as portable or as flexible as it might need to be for the problem it's trying to solve, or if the software is trying to deliver even more specifically. Also, it can kind of lower morale and engagement because since you're not looking at the core problem and understanding the needs of the software you're trying to deliver, you're baking in people's cognitive biases, you're introducing risk, and you're kind of disengaged as a result of not being a party to what's going on, the decisions that are being made. The other kind of data point, this comes from that Stanford University model, which is that teams tend to stay on task or solve harder problems longer. So they'll stay on a problem up to 65% longer if they're working in it collaboratively. People tend to kind of spur each other on or inspire each other. Even a sense like a healthy competition can even do that. And I think that's kind of an interesting phenomenon. Like I said, I'm kind of obsessed with these net positives that occur on teams. And this is sort of one of those things is that people stay on the thing. They want it to be done. They want to experience that finish line together. And the cost of not doing it is it kind of comes at the cost of your team in a way, because you're encouraging kind of what might be described as anti-patterns for a team. And this is more of a dogmatic bullet, but I'll kind of put that out there just like that. And I'll pause for any questions too, because we're going to go to another section in a second. Any questions from my 5 attendees?
There is a question in the chat.
Oh,
I can just read it to you.
okay, yeah, I'm not monitoring the chat.
It says, I'd love to hear more about one-on-ones. Does it ever work out negatively for morale when people pair poorly together?
Yeah, I think pairing well is really important. I don't know that I've seen it work out. Well, I mean, I would say that it's an issue the team has to solve. In a sense, there's no hiding on a team that pairs. And so if you're having difficulty or there's a big skill gap between people on the team, it helps the team address those issues more quickly. So sometimes teams do that really well, and people feel really good about the decision. And there are times where maybe it changes the way that person's work is, where they're assigned work in a sense, or things like that. And that's the only time I've really ever seen it go bad. And it's been very rare, actually, that's occurred. Most people rise to the occasion, and most work is flexible enough where people can lead or navigate in a pair and be really productive. And the reason why a lot of people like pairing is sort of that it's so growth focused. It's so focused on like bolting on more skills and like learning about a new thing. And so I would say the positives always outweigh the negatives in that case. But it's a good question. Thanks for it. So what does iterative problem solving look like? What are things that like people do? So the good news is this is probably the hardest part of it. It's just defining what a problem, a symptom, and a solution is. And I mentioned like a really simple molecule diagram a little bit earlier, but this table kind of has an example of it. But basically, the only difference is that I mentioned like the kind of pure common language in solving problems. It's just making sure that we understand what a problem is and what a symptom is, or a signal of that problem. And then like, what's our way of solutioning? And we want to, a lot of times teams set norms around not going to solutioning very quickly as a result of it, because they want to make sure they're defining and framing the correct problem. So I think these examples are kind of fun. I think they're actually incredibly precise too. So these are things that probably all of us have heard in the context of a project, but you might hear like, yeah, an issue on this team is like, our problem is we need new laptops. We don't have those laptops. And that is a solution, right? It's not necessarily, doesn't necessarily imply, the actual problem that we're trying to solve, which is maybe like, there's an insufficient way of trying to deliver that software, or we're missing laptops, or whatever it might be. So I think these are kind of good clarifications. And so getting straight on terminology and working with people is really key. And sometimes, like, I'll give you an example in a little bit, but you'll sort of see like just plotting out a problem is incredibly straightforward. And like I said, it seems remedial, but doing this with other people has sort of a really amazing quality to it, which is like they're seeing how you're thinking, and it gives them the opportunity to immediately provide you feedback in that diagramming or in that session together. So a team might say something like, our problem is we have poor morale, and more often than not, as a team kind of improves its emotional IQ and its sort of psychological safety of its own team, it's going to understand that that's a symptom of something else. There's sort of a causation involved, and that you might select a different tool, a problem-solving tool, as a result of that. I'm like, well, maybe we don't understand the root. We just see the symptom. We don't understand the root cause. Maybe we want to look at root causes or start to generate some root causes collectively as a team. Another kind of issue that a team might describe as our problem is how to speed up the ordering process. And this is sort of so specific and it's sort of rigid. It doesn't necessarily offer varying differences of opinion or other solution opportunities. But this is sort of like that third rail of jumping to a solution too quickly without understanding the problem in more intimate detail. And that, like I mentioned before, it sort of precludes that lateral thinking that a team can provide. Like, people can generate lots of ideas about ways to solution something, and we want to wait to the last responsible moment to solution things when we have the most amount of insight that we can possibly muster for the time frame we're working in. Our problem is which supplier to choose. And this is not really any part of the problem-solving process, rather. This is really a decision point. And decision points There's other tools that help you drive those out as well. And a lot of times, this is where you kind of borrow from the product design practice or the UX practice is, what is the user journey? Like, what are the things that people encounter, or what are the things that I encounter when I delivered my product, or when I put my product together with my suppliers? Understanding that in great detail, understanding the user journey and the subsequent use cases of the user journey will help you identify problems as well. And we'll kind of touch on those examples there as well.
I felt like that last one was like a trick question because like as you were going through the slide, I was kind of like reading each item and trying to kind of guess like which one it was instead of the problem. And the first three, it comes off the bullets, and the last one I was like, wait, that wasn't listed.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's probably the most pertinent one. Like as I've like kind of done these, I like whiteboarding and working remote. You kind of do things in Miro, or you do it like in a drawing tool. And it's sort of the one that, like, you know, if I think I understand the problem, I'd really like to be challenged on. And someone would be like, well, what are the preceding decisions or things that go into why you think it's a problem? And it's the one I'm held honest to the most, is I probably make assumptions about where I'm centering the problem or what I think the problem is. And I'm really like the idea of other people holding me accountable to making a better decision or driving out that through dialogue. And so it does feel like a trick question, but it's probably, like I said, it's probably the most valuable one up there, because it's one that a lot of us commit when we're just trying to identify problems.
Gotcha.
And it might make a little bit more sense when we go to the next slide too. So
Okay.
the simple molecule diagram, and this is where I was saying, like, the good news is that it's really easy to try. It's like, if you know a certain element of this diagram and you just do this with another person or even more people, when you have more people, you probably do something like a drop sort. And I can't really see everybody, but I wonder if anyone's done like a drop sort or sort of a generative activity with a team. But if you generated Post-its that kind of fall into those three categories, or maybe the team only knows the symptoms, or maybe the team only thinks it knows the problems, this will drive out that kind of really valuable conversation or dialogue that occurs on a team, which is like, why I think this thing goes here. And like I said, it's really no more complex than this. And I'll show you lots of other kind of diagramming and problem solving strategies, but they all kind of hinge on this. You might find more classification in other models, but it really kind of comes down to these really simple things, which is like, a symptom is a signal of a problem. And there's a potential solution for the symptom. There's also a potential solution for the problem, the core problem. And they're both valuable, and they're both things you want to consider. But you're just going to have to make a decision about how you address them. And if you know the problem and you're looking for solutions, then you're going to want to evaluate them. And then at some point, evaluating them involves like looking for the signal or the validation that the symptom has been improved or eliminated or markedly improved in some way. And that's sort of the context sharing kind of piece of the equation, which is like, how do I know how that happens over time, and how do I record or account for that over time? And it's sort of what comes after you've decomposed a problem with someone else. And so like I said, one of the things I was really drawn to this talk and this topic for was just the idea of doing this and myself kind of subjectively experiencing this with working with my own boss, which is like, hey, there's a way to like work with someone really quickly. And we have lots of problems to solve and lots of things to work on. How well do we know these things, and how close are we in terms of our definitions, and how well can we collaborate based on our definitions of those things, or how we perceive those things? And this is a really great way to kind of draw those out. And I'll kind of go into some other examples too. But you can sort of see why, like, not necessarily like defining something as a problem won't be very constructive or useful, like given this really simple model, right? Like you likely won't be able to catch the signal of the symptom with your solution if it's not really driving at the symptom that you think that you're solving for. Like in the previous example was like finding the right supplier for something, which is like, not sure where you would signal where you find the symptom for that problem, which is probably a people or process problem more than likely. So I'm going to kind of walk through a couple different examples of like more in-depth tools for problem solving. They work very similarly to the example I just gave you. They just kind of have more appendages and more variability that you can work from. But this is a fishbone diagram or a Ishikawa diagram, and it's kind of based on like the root cause analysis that's really important to the Six Sigma process or the Toyota production process. And the idea is that you can kind of put a problem or an issue. It's sort of the head of this diagram. And you can work from that. You can kind of work backwards by defining the attributes or the classifications of the issues that you're seeing or the signals that you're seeing. And these root causes are kind of, as you kind of divide them down and kind of keep going, you hopefully achieve a root cause. And you likely, these are actually really good for a team problem solving session, because lots of people can kind of like identify lots of different things that they see. And then that affinity mapping or kind of grouping, which is like the software subscription and subscription system and users, you likely kind of feel like you've, in a sense, collectively exhausted all of the classification you could do. You don't often use every one of these, and then obviously this model kind of keeps extending. You could add more fish bones, or I forget what part of the fish this is called, but like the fin, I guess, the rib cage of the fish. You can kind of keep adding them, but you rarely. The model is useful because it's sort of like it's exhaustive in some sense, and if that's what the team wants to do, is to keep listing those things out and kind of keep going or revisiting the problem week to week. They can do that, or the team can feel confident in answering it and look and identifying a root cause and saying like, okay, we're confident now. We can go test and see if this thing is the root cause for these cancellations in this case. And that in a sense, that decision that all the different options and all the variability and root causes were sort of generated by the team. Each member of the team could put these on Post-its. Now, this is a Miro board that a couple people worked through. And then they can sort of say like, I don't think I have any more ideas of what could be the root cause. Our best bet is this thing, and they can come to that agreement on that. Or if it's a number of things, and they can look to instrument or solution against that number of things, and that's their next point of departure is like, okay, how do we solution? And teams are pretty good at that. And so, like I said, all this context and all these different permutations or all these potential root causes have all been reviewed by the team. They've all been seen by the team. In most cases, they've been completely generated by the team, and the team can kind of move on. If they did this again, they might change their opinion, and it might be improved or more focused based on more information. And the idea of kind of doing this as often as we do all the other ceremonies holds a lot of value for our learning and also how well we get at solving problems. This is an example of a board that's been obfuscated a little bit, showing that this idea of like iteratively doing this multiple times over week to week to see how well you can improve something. I mentioned drop sorting as a technique for getting to make it really easy for people to contribute different root causes, and we use this technique for kind of working up from a bottom-up approach. So if you kind of give a team the simplest way of defining something, which is like, hey, what do you think, what are the potential root causes for this thing we're seeing, this problem we think we're going to solve? And you can affinity map them upward. This isn't the best example of affinity mapping root causation necessarily, more like finding problems or things that users like or dislike. But I guess it's worth mentioning that the problem solving tools that I'm introducing here are as useful for software as they are for like the interpersonal dynamics of your team. So if your team has like a problem with how it's norming around engineering practices or how often it's talking to users, these same models and tools are applicable for solving those problems and improving them. And pretty often, if you're on a team that does retrospectives, teams get action things like that all the time. They get feedback about like, these members of the team are going to go figure out how our engineering norms are going to work. Or these members of the team are going to go figure out, how we can, have better meetings or less meetings, or, they're given a task that maybe has an ambiguous plan or solution towards it. And that team might use one of these techniques when they're working on that retro item during the week, and then come back to the team and share that as well. Or they might decide to engage the whole team in that problem and do one of these sessions that we've been kind of demonstrating here. So, like I said, I think they're really powerful internally and to the product itself. And both are important, and the team should be willing to kind of solve both problems because they really matter. The team health and the product are really inextricably linked. And so if we believe that, then we should act it with the same level of seriousness and urgency in solving those problems. And this is just another kind of affinity map. This one's obfuscated because it's got client information in it. But it's the same idea, is that people can kind of generate and see each other's thoughts. They can categorize each other's thoughts around a solution, and they can decide which are the most high priority things or they'd like to tackle, or issues they'd like to tackle. And that decision gets made collectively, which is really, like I said, really important and really key to kind of context sharing. So where can our problem solving approach fail? You're probably familiar with like the software, product delivery kind of product cycle, this idea of like production, which is like this inner circle kind of represents the work that we know that we can deliver with high confidence that will deliver value to our customers. And that's sort of our backlog, our production backlog. And at the same time, on most teams, there's a level of experimentation or discovery occurring. And so our problem solving strategies break down a little bit, because the folks that are like being good product managers and designers and engineers are kind of working on the production part of the software. But to grow a product and to have a product be successful and have potentially a product market fit, we want to improve it. We want to have a kind of continuous discovery mentality about how we introduce new features and where we explore on making a product better or even making a different product. And so you're kind of straddling both worlds. And this is sort of where our ceremonies break down. And like I said, one of the reasons why I'm kind of attracted to this topic is that, like, to do this, you have to have context of the thing you're trying to do or the area that you're trying to discover new work in and discover new problems to solve. And sort of empathizing and defining those problems, and then kind of building some way of assessing them, and then seeing the evaluation itself, seeing the results of the test. And you want people who are in this inner track to help you do that. You want to engage the whole team in the current product and the future of the product, or the things that are going to impact their world. And it's not just because you want the brain power. You want the team to function at a high level. You want a sense of ownership to happen. And this is kind of what ownership means in this definition. And so because we have all those practitioners kind of, like I said, straddling both worlds, they're kind of like in the production cycle, they're in this discovery cycle. We need a way for them to bridge the gap between those things. And so context sharing tools are sort of the second half of this picture. And so the reason why we're doing this is sort of like, it's one of those gaps, I think, that's maybe missing from the way a lot of teams work, which is just sort of, they get good at proposing solutions, they get good at implementing them quickly, but what we're not as good at is measuring the efficacy of the things we build, and like over time, and then maybe the unintended consequences or impact of changing a piece of software, or even product features of that software over time. We don't really look at it the same way. And we don't look at it with the level of scrutiny that we do maybe up front. And we're gotten really good at like defining products up front, but we're not maybe as good at sort of improving them over time. And so I think one of the things that I guess I want to impart with this idea about being more accountable to outcomes is that for it to really work and to be defining good outcomes as a team, is like we want everyone to share in that accountability when they propose something. And so this is actually maybe a different topic on its own, but the hint is, or the idea here is that, like, we all want to know that the work that we're doing is going to tie back to that outcome, which is the big problems we're solving in the small way that we're doing it week to week. And so I mentioned that we're really good at sort of defining which problems to solve up front. A lot of times you've probably seen this double diamond diagram, which shows like product discovery happens and this sort of divergent thinking, and then convergent thinking happens where we look at different problems we think we can solve. And then we look at solutions and a more divergent thinking again around all the different things that we could do to solve that problem. And then we look at the problems we think are worth solving, that are the most monetizable or the most achievable given the technologies that are available, and so on and so forth. And we kind of get to this point where we've got a backlog of software ready to make software. We've done discovering the problems to solve and the ways to solve them. And we just kind of go through this iterative cycle, which is sort of like the agile process. And I think it's kind of important to note, that the objectives here don't really change. And I think it's important that the concept that I'm going to introduce to you is really based on like interpreting this in a different way. And so if the discovery phase's objectives are to gain a deep understanding of the business needs and user goals and the complexity of a proposed product, I don't know that that ever changes. I don't know if that's something we don't do as we keep going. And if the framing phase, the second diamond, is to gain the ability to prioritize features of the product through deep empathy for the user, business, and technology, it's sort of saying like, hey, these things go first, and we're going to build these things first because they're going to have this result or this outcome that we really care about, which is like it solves a problem for people, and people are willing to pay money for that thing. And aren't we great? We've done that. I don't know that that ever changes. Most things tell me that it doesn't. And so the underlying purpose for doing this is that we're de-risking the product. We're looking at like, hey, which problems can we solve? Which ones maybe can we solve uniquely? Are we sure about that? We want to de-risk that idea because we're going to invest a bunch of money in that idea. So let's validate it. Let's have a model for validating what we're doing, and then we'll decide what goes first and what goes next based on that model or that validation. What gives us that signal that our product might be successful or not successful? And it's sort of important at this point to kind of define a little bit of what outcomes mean. And so outcomes are really about moving towards this idea of evidence-based decisioning around the product. And that can be quantitative, that can be qualitative. But the idea is that we want to get better as a team, just like we want to get better at shipping software, and we want to get better at how well we're meeting our customers' needs. We also want to get better at setting the outcomes that we intend to have, almost like the ability to estimate work really well is a place we want to grow. We also want to get better at how we define outcomes as a team. We don't have to be dogmatic about which outcomes we're pursuing. We do want to know that they are delivering value to us and to the people who are paying for the software or the product that we're making. And then that idea behind those outcomes that it should give us a clear product direction. It might even contain our products. There might identify places where we might make another product or a different product, or keep it as one. And it kind of, those outcomes help us drive that, which is like, well, which of these outcomes feel antithetical to the core purpose of this software? And which ones are more like new opportunities or new things to address? And so we need a kind of a framework. We need a way to think about these things. So that, in my opinion, we need a way for everyone on the team to make this decision. And so, and I apologize because I see Janelle's on the call, but I'm kind of advocating for this framework, which is just another way of diagramming from an outcome-based perspective. So we kind of saw, like, you could think about this as a vertical, Ishikawa diagram in a way, but it puts the outcomes at the top, which is the thing that we're going to be measuring to know that we're building the right things. And what sort of falls in next behind this, this definition, or what we think our goal is, our measure for success is, are opportunities. And these are things, opportunities have their own kind of level of rigor and their own definition around them, specifically about like, what are things that are problems worth solving? And why do we think we want to solve them? Like, what needs what needs are being met with the software? And potentially, are we the ones that are best suited to solution or deliver on those needs? Do we have like an unfair advantage in some way? And those are the opportunities. That's how we want to assess those opportunities. And then as you kind of get to the head of the fish, in this case, is maybe like a lot of fish strung up on a on a dock. The solutioning phase, we look at de-risking each of these things as solutions. So if we have as a team, we decide, that we're looking at a number of solutions that can deliver on this opportunity or solve this problem, we want to evaluate them. And the best way to evaluate them is to kind of list out the assumptions around them, the things that have to be true for this solution to deliver against this opportunity, and in turn for this opportunity to deliver against this outcome. And so if we do this, if we kind of fill in these, the way this information sort of feeds into the outcome that we're pursuing, we allow people an ability to sort of challenge our assumptions or ask questions about the ways that we're learning about those assumptions or de-risking them. And that's what the experiment level denotes, which is an experiment means lots of different things. It could mean a research method. It could be a piece of software. It could be a feature in a software in some cases. But the idea is that we're looking at we're validating the assumption, if it's true, that it delivers value through the solution and solves the problem at the kind of opportunity level, and that by solving that opportunity or that pain point for someone in turn, we're moving the needle. We're delivering against some outcome that has value in the market or has value for the people that we're intending to make software for. And so the idea, I think, of sort of seeing how this works in a kind of a multi-tree branch is probably best captured this way. This is a more realistic view of how people use this. This is another Miro diagram, but this is around a security model or developing a security model for a piece of software. And you can sort of see like ideas that have been orphaned and ideas that are being really developed and scrutinized, and the assumptions are being challenged. There's even formal hypothesis drafting happening here. And why this is really great is that you've kind of, the teams have solution problems together, and they've kind of worked through some of those models with some of those tools that we introduced earlier, and they're sort of recording the decisions, or they're recording why they believe what they believe about those solutions in then one more larger context, which is that of like the product and the desired outcome, like the purpose of this product that we're making. And so they kind of ladder up in a very useful way. It also invites people into this process that are maybe new to the team, or might have lost sight of that. They're like, because they're being good product managers and designers and engineers, they're kind of myopic and sometimes in the day-to-day work. And this allows them a chance to kind of reach back to the macro and see those concepts in play, and even evaluate other things that they're doing that might apply to their day-to-day work, and kind of look back and say like, oh, I can see what we're delivering on this hypothesis, and this is the outcome that we want, but maybe in that next IPM, I'm going to challenge this idea a little bit differently, or I'm going to ask about this assumption because I don't understand what it means, or I really wonder if this is the opportunity we should be pursuing. I feel like there's another opportunity here, and these solutions might be better applied in a different way, and allows them to have that creative and sort of critical feedback loop extend down to everybody on the team. And that's sort of why this last piece of context sharing is kind of critical to that. You can do this. This is an example of me trying to figure out somebody else's product. So I kind of drew this board out while they were telling me about why they were solving certain problems. And so I kind of categorized the feedback they were giving me and the context they were giving me, and I kind of glued it together using this framework. And I feel like I had a better understanding, and I was better at listening to what the person was trying to describe about their product by asking them to help me categorize what it meant, and also like, and why they were solving the problems that they were, and how their software reflected the solution, the way they were solving that problem. And now I kind of feel like in just 30 minutes, I gained a lot of context in a product that might take me hours to gain context on. And so I really liked the idea of taking this concept and sharing it with people and keeping these artifacts up to date all the time for the same reason. And all this really does is extends the idea of what's called innovation accounting. So the kind of opportunity solution tree that we just walked through is just another version of innovation accounting that's just less spreadsheet-like. And I might wager that there are people that might prefer this way of seeing it. But basically, if you're looking at the kind of key outcomes, like numbers of customers, number of orders, and looking at it week to week in these kind of cycles, you can see when a feature is introduced, and when impact is expected to happen, and maybe when they see it and in the data, in actual customer response. And so this is just another concept. This concept was introduced by Eric Ries in the Lean Startup. It wasn't really described in detail in that book, but a lot of people said like, oh, well, I need a way to account for all the outcomes that I'm driving at. And this sort of like field of thought and all these tool sets were kind of derived from just that couple sentences in that book, towards the end of that book. Like I said, I kind of like the idea. I don't know that this structure doesn't feel as open. It doesn't tell you as much the level of deep context that you get in the other model. But I would say that that this information is just as crucial to know if you're working on the team as well, which is like, oh, there are going to be unintended consequences to this feature. Would I see it in these signals? Would I see it in the data? And then maybe I want to know more. Maybe I want to look at the actual decisioning or the solution tree that generated that feature as a result. Maybe I want to understand it better, or I want to understand which contribution or which metric it moves, by existing or being a feature in that software. So I hope that you kind of got the bug that I did by looking at kind of these two tools in context. Hopefully they'll kind of fit into the context of your work. They fit into mine. Like I said, I'm kind of always looking for opportunities to get to know how to work with someone else. I'm happy to take any questions that you have, and I appreciate the questions that I got along the way. But that is all I have.